What is up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at James Conner, the running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and taking a look at what we can expect from him from a fantasy lens in 2020. Now, James Conner most certainly did not return value on his first round ADP of last year, disappointing a lot of fantasy owners for multiple reasons, but mostly due to injury. Finished the season with only 116 carries, 464 rushing yards, 34 receptions, and 251 receiving yards, but still had 7 total touchdowns. He missed a total of 6 games, 5 due to an AC joint and 1 due to a quad contusion, but he also had the added sword in your side of having the dreaded, I'm healthy, I play, comes in during the first part of the game, has a reoccurrence of the injury and leaves. That happened multiple times in the season, so it was just not a good year for James Conner in terms of fantasy production and making his fantasy owners happy. So I'm actually surprised that he's still maintaining the third round ADP that he has right now. I think that's fair value considering what he could be if he can actually finish the season out strong with Ben Roethlisberger coming back and the offense being a lot more productive from an offensive standpoint. He did at least have 14.6 fantasy points per game, which was buoyed by a few big games in the middle of the season. But as I said, like multiple times where against Cleveland and against New York where he was back, but he barely got any work because he got re-injured right away. So if you started him in those weeks, especially in week 16 for your Super Bowl, completely cratered and killed your team. So not only did he constantly stick it to you by being out, he also hurt you in the fantasy championship as well by only putting 3.2 points. So there's a lot of people that I'm sure are very mad when they remember the name James Conner because of what he did for you. I shouldn't put it that way, what he did against your fantasy team. And like I said, he did buoy his season with 2 massive outputs, finishing in the top 6 at the running back position, and had another really good game against Miami in week 8. So even with the crappy quarterback play of Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, like we see what James Conner can be. And we know how Mike Tomlin likes to run his offense. He loves to run it through a single running back. I'm concerned that that's not going to hold up for James Conner when you consider just the massive amount of not only just injuries in general, but they are connective tissue injuries, and it could honestly have something to do with his recovery from battling cancer a few years ago, coming back from that. I mean, going through chemotherapy is not a fun thing, and I love James Conner the person, and I really hope that he can succeed, but we have to be realistic in terms of looking at what this means from a football perspective, especially heading into a season where there's the additional risk, I guess is a good way of putting it, but the looming fact that at any point, any number of players could contract the coronavirus. I'm not sure if James Conner would be at a greater risk of being out longer if he does contract the virus in the middle of the year. So there's just a lot of potential downside to James Conner. They also drafted Anthony McFarland, albeit not with an incredibly high draft capital pick, but there is connection with Mike Tomlin and the Maryland program. So I like Anthony McFarland a lot. I do think that he carries a decent bit of upside in this year, even in 2020 with Benny Snell and Jalen Samuels on the roster. I think Anthony McFarland can slowly edge himself into the good graces of the coaching staff there. I think it's James Conner's job to lose, and if you want to make a bet that James Conner can go 16 games, he's going to return value, even if you have to take him in the third round. Personally, I'm not targeting many running backs in the third round typically. I would rather look at some of the receivers there. If I'm going to take 2 running backs, I typically like to do it in the first 2 rounds to be specific. But I do think there is room for James Conner to return value on that pick. It's kind of that post-hype sleeper in terms of everyone was expecting him to be a massive value last year. With Ben Roethlisberger going down and then him suffering injuries of his own, it just didn't happen. Just have a contingency plan because likely you're not going to get a full 16 games out of James Conner. He's one of the few players that when we do projections, we're doing it with the expectation of him not finishing the season playing a full 16 games. So a couple other things to note, even last year, and part of this has to do with the fact that he had those couple games where he came back and wasn't able to play the full game, but he only had a 57.8% opportunity share. So we already have kind of seen a shift away from being a huge workhorse back in terms of how Mike Tomlin runs his offense. But last year was kind of an anomaly all around, so I don't want to read too much into that. Just with everything that happened with the quarterback position, it kind of threw everything that we knew about Mike Tomlin into the blender, and kind of just want to throw 2019 out as a statistical anomaly. Not that we're expecting there to be the same efficiency in 2018, just because Ben Roethlisberger is a few years older and coming off of an injury that could limit his ability. So you kind of have to blend the expected regression from 2018 with also ignoring 2019 for the most part, but not completely. So James Conner did have a 4.8 yards per touch, which was only 30th amongst running backs, but he had a high juke rate at 28%, average breakaway run rate of 3.4%, but a 31.7% dominator rating. A lot of that came from the 7 touchdowns that he was able to produce in 10 games, heavily involved in the receiving game. So overall, I do think that James Conner can be pretty productive in this offense. If there's any player that I'm going to bank on not finishing 16 games, it's James Conner. If I'm having to spend a 3rd round pick, I'd rather go with a safer option with the same amount of upside. Last year, he also didn't face great run blocking efficiency. Now, granted, I think teams were able to sell out to stop the run because the passing game was so abysmal. So that's another anomaly that we can probably throw out. So what does that leave him? So again, with projecting not finishing a full 16 games, I think that he can still hit pretty productive fantasy numbers, hitting 895 rushing yards, 42 receptions, 321 receiving yards, and 9 total touchdowns. It would put him about 220 fantasy points. But again, if he's able to play 16 games, like you could see in a crystal ball, and all you could tell me was James Conner played 16 games, I would smash pick him in the 3rd round, being honest. I don't know that you can expect that. So if you want to take the gamble on James Conner finishing the season without suffering another injury, then he's a smash play in the 3rd round. But overall, I'm probably going to pass. There's plenty of other guys I'd rather have in the 3rd round. I'll let someone else take the risk. And if he does blow up, then kudos to the people that had the guts to take him in the 3rd. But that's my approach this year. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit that subscribe button for more videos like this one, and we'll see you guys in the next video.